Great. Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on how to maximize your social media during and post times of crisis. I'm actually absolutely delighted to be joined by our panel here today to discuss the topic, which is really important, on how to maximize your social media during and post times of crisis. So Doug, it's great to have you and Natalie. We were going to have this live event and then obviously the crisis kicked in. So it's fantastic to be having this over a webinar, doing it virtually from my living room in Richmond rather than central London in a nice bar that I think was planned. But I'm the chair of the PRCA's independent network. And what we do is we like to bring the freelance community together. Really, it's an opportunity to normally network, but also to learn and share best practice and ideas and top tips that are happening. And I think it's really important, especially now at the moment, during times of crisis, that we can all come together as a community. So just a way of introduction to myself, I'm Alice Weightman. I'm the founder and CEO of Hanson Search and the Work Crowd. Hanson Search is a traditional headhunting business. We support agencies and in-house teams globally to find comms and marketing talent, and actually found Doug his position at Third Bridge. And also I'm the founder of the Work Crowd, which is an online platform of expert marketeers, so across content, digital, social, and we help businesses find those experts to run project-based work. So we have a community of over 5,000 freelancers across the UK, Europe, and the Middle East, and it's growing. So please do sign up if you're looking for freelance work. We've noticed actually a real increase in the demand for freelancers. And also, if there's businesses out there that really want to boost their brand and need that support, then we have a great community of individuals. So Doug is going to be really talking to us today around building your online social media presence, your personal brand, and the importance of that, and the importance of social media. And Natalie, who is a content specialist, is also going to be talking about trends in the marketplace. So I'll let the individuals in our panel introduce themselves, but they will talk, but please do ask questions. We're really open to having an interactive discussion. So Doug, over to you first of all. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Alice. And yet, thank you, Hanson Search, for giving me my current opportunity. So for those, to give you a quick introduction, my history is social media. I started in the journalism field and leveraging social media in a way to gather information. It was an information gathering tool, the dark side of PR, as it were. And from that, I then began working as a social media manager for the 5th largest contract catering company in the world, wherein there I spent a lot of time refining the company's own social media strategy, looking at the best practice, looking at crisis management, how we use social media to reach out and resolve issues, but also then looking at the individual levels. How can we leverage social media to empower our team, our workforce, and the people around us? And I found from there, I was like, this is it. This is a thing that brings people together and that really can champion your own personal brand, but also the mission of the corporate world as well. I then, after working there, I also worked freelance, creating my own agency, Digital DNA, working with local agencies, and then on top of that, I now work at Third Bridge Group Limited, and Third Bridge Group is a B2B business, and their focus is on kind of reaching out to investors, empowering their research, and my role is to use social media to generate leads and to empower our staff as well. So that's me.
Great, thank you. And Natalie, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks for that, Doug, and thanks, Alice. So I'm Natalie Grover. So I've worked with the Work Crowd for the last year. So I had a couple of placements at Raving PR last year on Huawei. In terms of my experience, I've been working as a social media freelancer and content freelancer for the past 6 years. And that can roll out from social media management, strategy, copywriting, influencer marketing for B2B, B2C, SMEs, covering a range of FMCG clients and beauty, tech, employer branding, design and finance. I've also worked teaching social media courses for the media training company. And prior to that, I spent 3.5 years in account management in consumer publishing, 7 years before that in TV production and advertising. And I also have a vested interest in supporting mental health as an ambassador for BEAT. So they're the UK's largest eating disorder charity. And I'm also a volunteer for South London Cares. So I have a real interest in social media for good as well.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, Doug, it'd be great to hand over to you. And I know you're going to want to share some insights into really how to build a personal brand, importance of content, and also, you know, social media during and post times of crisis.
Yep. So I think I always like to start talking about social media with an analogy. We always focus on the seeds, the fruit of our content, whether that's generating new leads, whether that's generating buzz around our business. That is always seems to be our end goal. But what we always forget about is that ground level. Think of it like soil. You wouldn't plant a seed in a really bad, unnurtured soil. So I always say to people, start from the ground and start identifying who your personal brand is, particularly for the freelancers out there. What are some of the industries that you're placing in? And really start by identifying, what am I going to give? What is my value proposition? What am I going to do? And what are some of the kind of the sectors and the people that I'm going to target? We often refer to it as persona targeting, persona marketing, where you identify that pinpoint person that you're going to reach out for. Start by nurturing your soil by finding out what is your value proposition, what is your mission, who are the people that you're going to be targeting, and then building your fundamental brand around that. So we can start that right from the very basics with your own LinkedIn profile. So it's something that can never be stressed enough, which is that your presence, your profile is almost like a search result. Everything that you put into that can be discovered. It can be picked up in search results. And it's also going to be things that are going to elevate you and give you prominence over other users, under other individuals. But secondly to that is, not only will it help you be discovered, but it will also enhance your message. So if you're reaching out, you're trying to generate new leads for a business, if you're doing B2B, or even if you're trying to reach out directly to consumers, you want to have a profile that resonates with that audience. So when they come to your profile, they come to your brand, your presence, what they see is exactly what they expect. It's built for them and it really sings to you. And it's something that at Third Bridge, it's been a real challenge for me to try and break apart some of the corporate messaging and really emphasize that individual that's behind that. So rather than having a sea of people, the same profile photo, the same about section, the same bullet points, what is it that you are going to offer to the person that comes to you, so that when you reach out to them, you have more impact? And that's what I mean by nurturing that soil. So cementing your identity in terms of keywords. What are 3 to 5 words and phrases that encapsulate what you do? Make sure that they're really prominent, even in your job title on LinkedIn, making sure that it's there at every possible instance. And then on top of that is then saying, am I talking to the person? Are you making personal addresses? And just some anecdotal evidence for me, on Third Bridge ad copy, whenever I'm using personal address and you're speaking to the person, I tend to find it, as I say, anecdotally, I tend to see sort of 3 to 4% more engagements. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that could be an extra message, that could be an extra connection. And so hopefully what I'm getting across is, you start with understanding who your target audience is, where your sector is, really building that into your presence, every touch point. And then secondly is making sure that you're active in your calls to action on your profile, but then also in your content. So are you giving them a way to connect? Are you making it easily digestible so that people come to your presence, they come to your brand and they say, okay, this person, they're not just a nameless face. They're going to do this for me. They're going to generate leads because they've done this, this, and this for me. Oh, and here's how I can connect with them. So your personal brand, from that perspective, cement who you are, who you're reaching out to. And then the second part of that is the big content piece. And I know, Natalie, you're probably going to have even more suggestions than me about this. So yeah, my experience has definitely been kind of unifying social media into the overall marketing strategy, and using social media to create an expectation of content. On this day we're going to deliver this, on this day we're going to do this. And so I'm going to start from the bottom and say, when you're creating content, always think about that audience that you've identified. Who are the kind of people that you're going to be targeting? And sometimes you're going to get it wrong. Sometimes, particularly for those that have done paid ads, you think you know who your target audience is, and then you start looking at all the impressions, who's viewed your content. You think, I thought I was targeting marketing specialists with this, but I've got 50 salespeople that are looking at this content. Is that something I can capitalize on? Are these people more engaged? So sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you think you know who your audience is. So when you create content, the idea is that you want to make it as applicable and diverse as possible, but always honing in on your core message. So how can you make your core message appeal to as many of those personas as possible? And so what I would say for you to start off with is you need to create an expectation of what you're going to deliver and hold yourself to account when you're building that personal brand. So this is saying to yourself, drawing a line in the sand and saying, on Monday, this is the kind of content that I'm going to create and I'm going to build, so that when people come to your profile, they might have discovered you through that targeted, tailored piece of content. They come to your profile and they see, this person's delivering all of this good stuff, rather than spattering and throwing content in there. And that's the biggest mistake I see people make, is a lack of consistency and a lack of expectation. So for example, at Third Bridge, I know that we have 3 pieces of content every week that takes a snippet of our paid offer and just teases it in a nice landing page. We call it our interview synopsis. Summarizes a paid piece of content, but in a free package. And we do that regularly so that people know and they come to expect that piece of content. And so that means that they'll see it, they know to expect it, and you're going to start building a routine, a regular audience of people that are there. And so I don't want to take too much time on there, except to say, when you are pushing out content, there's so many different formats that you can do it in, and there's so many different tiers in which you can target. So within your personas, you might go for people that don't actually know who you are, or people that are at the very bottom. They know exactly who you are. They've seen your content and they think, this person can help my objectives. So when you're creating your expectations, your regular piece of content, are you creating them in a way that's going to take them from someone that doesn't know you, a really broad piece of content, to something that says, guys, if you don't speak to me, someone else is going to take advantage of this offer? And it's placing that sense of urgency. But you need to make sure that you create an expectation of the regular content, but you create an expectation that you're going to be speaking to different people. So what I'm really saying there is that your content should serve different purposes. And in marketing, it's real back to basics, top of the funnel. They've never heard of you before. This is just an awareness piece. Then you go straight into the middle of the funnel. They might have seen you before and you're trying to get them onto your side, giving them a little bit more value in what you do. And then thirdly, hey guys, why don't you check out, why don't we arrange a conversation? You've seen something before, let's speak out. So we've got expectation of regular routine piece of content. We've got different tiers of content to reach those different people. And if you have any questions on kind of the specifics of those pieces of content, let us know. But then also it's you don't want to bore your audience. You don't want to bore them. We've all got the same email again and again, and you start switching off. The same for social media. They'll see the same picture, the same caption again and again, or exactly the same format, and it starts to get stale. And from experience for me, this is something that we saw with our interview synopsis pieces of content. So we would have a very, very similar icon, a very similar illustration with the same color format. And people started to expect it, but they also started to notice that it was the same thing and it wasn't capturing their attention as much. So then it relies on you to be aware of that, be looking at the data and think, how can I tweak this? How can I freshen it up? So you've got your content, you're making it regular, you're hitting those targets, but then have a think about, how can I freshen this up? Maybe once a week, have a spring clean, go through, say, that was bad, that was terrible. No one contacted me about that. I didn't get any engagements. No one clicked through to my website. So nothing there. So I'm conscious that I want to make this a discussion, and hopefully that's a nice introduction there. So we've got content regularity is going to be that seed that you plant, that piece of content, but it needs that well nourished soil to start with. So yeah, so that's my quick intro there.
Great. Thank you so much indeed, Douglas, for sharing that. And I think it's really important to get all those foundations, as you talk about, right. Natalie is going to talk a little bit more about social media, especially during times of crisis, and perhaps things that you've seen of how businesses or people are reacting to these times, and content and social media around that.
Yeah, so this has been a really interesting period from a social media strategy perspective, and based on the fact that I work for a lot of variants of kind of agencies, direct clients, SMEs, B2B, B2C, seeing how everyone's kind of dealing with everything. And I think this is the perfect time for many businesses to look at their social strategy. And you know, I think very difficult for many people who have planned all their content so far in advance, and everything's gone out the window with COVID. So business as usual has, you know, can be seen as an incentive, but at a time of crisis, it can be seen as really kind of tone deaf. So I think customers and followers really need substance, so they can, you know, I think there's, you know, consumers are, you know, are more savvy than ever, and they can spot a performative piece of content very swiftly, and people just chiming in on a hashtag, and that needs to be, I think the biggest thing I've seen is people need to have more substance to their content. So I think in times like this, brands and my internet saying unstable, so if I'm a bit kind of delayed, I apologize, but prioritizing relevant content, listen and be relevant, so share, you know, continue to build those relationships and be open and transparent. I think this is a time where so many businesses are sort of taking a step back and looking at how they're engaging with their followers, what content they're sharing, is it relevant in times like this? What as a business can you be doing to support, you know, for example, multicultural recruitment, supporting causes like the NHS in times like this? What are you doing in terms of your CSR? Is it an important conversation that can be shared on social? And again, things like social listening. You know, using platforms, third-party platforms like Brandwatch, Sprouts, Social Bakers, to really understand what your audience is engaging with. What are your customers saying about your brand in particular? Is there, you know, all of that conversation will impact your social strategy as a whole. And again, you know, using creative content, a very strong call to action is always important. But yeah, I think in terms of some interesting stats and things that would be interesting for many of the audience, and I'm keeping what I'm talking about very general, because I'll understand there's a different kind of type of audience across the board joining us today. So in general, social media engagement rates are up by 61%, and this is the period, you know, a COVID period, so it doesn't take into consideration the last few weeks. Social media live streaming consumption is up 66%. So again, this is a real opportunity for organizations to utilize LinkedIn Live and have kind of open conversations. Twitter users have climbed by 23%. LinkedIn engagement is up by 24%. And really interestingly, this year on average, CEOs post engagement rates are up by 90% on LinkedIn. So this is a real time for CEOs and the boards of organizations to be having deeper conversations and writing content and publishing articles, etc., showing where they stand on certain crisis, you know, management. I think transparency is just incredibly important right now, and there's an appetite for it. People want to see substance. I guess some of the really important things I've seen out in the market, so cause marketing in terms of Deliveroo, they've been delivering to the NHS 500,000 meals, I believe, which has been a donation via the app. If you use the Deliveroo app, that's been a really incredible incentive. Leon were very quickly able to step up their home deliveries through the COVID crisis through Uber Eats and Deliveroo, and that included some staple items in terms of grocery as well. ARG is a client I've worked with through Impero, and they donated 50,000 to the American Civil Liberties Union recently. And they're also working on a number of donations to many of the sort of organisations impacting right now in terms of Black Lives Matter. Some of my B2B clients, so I work with a design and architectural firm, and they have been, really challenged with in terms of move management right now. So they were very open and honest about across their LinkedIn in terms of explaining the importance of the government guidelines they'd be adhering to, how they were sort of managing their staff and clients throughout the process. And they've started to work with organisations like CoreNet on their on virtual hackathons for wellbeing and things like that. So people are finding interesting and savvy ways of getting around, a lot of the conversations that we're having now. And I think this is a real opportunity in time to look at the way we use social media and what we're saying. There's been a lot of controversy with a lot of kind of brands right now in terms of performative content. And I think there's a real opportunity for brands and PR and marketing to work closer together. And I understand that's not as easy when you've got, your social media sitting, obviously this won't apply to everyone, but you've got your social media sitting with an agency, you've got your PR team internally, and there needs to be a real join up, which is again very hard right now when we're living with COVID. But I think some of those things will really help prevent a backlash with certain content when it goes out in a time like we've had the last 3 weeks. So I think in terms of future social trends, we off the back of that conversation, we'll see diversity and deeper transparency in terms of messaging and creative. Again, customer services development, the use of WhatsApp for interacting with your consumers, and live streaming. We'll see a lot of that continue, and webinars and podcasts, and being able to have deeper conversations that might not happen face to face right now. But this is a really interesting time for everyone, and I think it's really important that if instead of rushing content and pushing content out, because we're all used to that reactive content that we must get some content out on our channels. Perhaps it's an opportunity to step back and think, what are we saying? Is it important? Is it in line with our business guidelines and our ethos? And if we have in terms of managing historic situations that might not go down so well in a time of crisis like now, is it an opportunity to be transparent and being open and honest, and what changes are you going to make? I've seen some really interesting email campaigns as well from certain organisations that sent emails outlining in a bit more detail, which obviously you can't do as such on social media, about the changes they're making internally in terms of recruitment and things like that. And that's a really good opportunity to kind of link up your social with all your marketing activity.
Great, thank you, Natalie, for sharing that. We're actually getting a few questions coming in, so I might sort of jump to the first question actually, which just says, Doug raises an interesting point on identifying target audiences. With social media is accessed by everyone, critics and audience, different types of audiences. As an organisation, how do you manage or handle the audience that you're not targeting, whose comments might actually be negative to your reputation, especially during times of crisis?
Oh, that is such a critical question, and it's a real challenge that I think we all face every day, especially when you, as I said earlier, sometimes you think you know your audience and you get it completely wrong. I always recommend to people to be upfront and transparent. And as Natalie said about kind of dealing with matters of crisis, you need to make sure that you have a really clear set of guidelines and practices. So for me at ThirdBridge, I have a clear crisis documentation which said what's the worst possible outcome, who's the person that's responsible for approving responses, if we're anticipating certain matters such as let's say the recent controversies, let's pen some responses, because the biggest thing is, although it's a matter of crisis, you still need to be seen as someone that is prepared to engage in a dialogue. But the thing that underpins that is that you need to be prepared to say to the people that maybe that aren't your audience, we are listening. And we sometimes get into a bubble and we think these are the only people that matter to our business. And I think that is a really poor way of approaching any kind of marketing strategy. So in terms of how do we manage and handle audiences that we are not targeting and that leave organizations that might dent our reputation, have that clear procedure in place to prepare for those negative responses. Have a meeting with your colleagues, with your organization, say, what is our stance on this? Be 100% clear on your message. What is your response to these comments? And you need to be prepared to respond. Because for me, I think in many cases saying nothing says far more than
it really is.
Say
We've
and
seen the last few weeks, people don't know what to say, and so they've just muted, and I think it's a really damaging thing for a brand to be doing. And we know that behind the scenes they'll be having conversations, how do we tackle this, and it doesn't happen overnight. But I think if you're prepared to put out content that's performative without substance, or having a real kind of mindset in the background thinking, okay, let's think about our history, what have we done, what could come up. So being really strategic and thinking, and organizations change. So what happened 10 years ago, or, even 3 to 5 years ago, will be different because new people come on board and the organizations change, just like we do as human beings. We all kind of evolve and grow and learn. But I think there needs to be, thought process in terms of, we can't just put out content because of our history and this, that, and the other. And so you need to be prepared for a backlash if you're going to put out content like that, if you don't think about it hard enough. So I'll let you go on, Douglas.
No, to be fair, I think you just said exactly what I wanted to go on to say. And really, when you respond to matters of crisis, you're creating expectation. The expectation is that you would respond to other crises as well. So 2 things come with that. So Natalie, you mentioned earlier about social listening and social monitoring. Make sure that when you're using social media, it is an information gathering and listening tool. It is not simply a one-way street, because you'll then you'll identify conversations, potential red flags, potential additional crises. So you can then go, okay, this is coming up. Let's get our company line straight. Let us understand what is our message. And then also, when we do respond to these people, let's not just say, great guys, good job. Let's give them value. Let's tell them what we've done. Let's show them other initiatives. Create that understanding that we're not just jumping on a hashtag, jumping on a bandwagon.
How then, just leading on from that, I hear a lot of clients ask me, do you end up fueling the conversation, and sort of you end up with a sort of social media rampage? But you recommend absolutely you should be engaging, you should be responding to those negative responses.
For me, I think you do, but it needs to be in a structured way. So some solutions you can have, like Falcon.io used to have, it's one of the social media management tools. You used to be able to have pre-baked responses that can be approved, so you can just choose your response. Admittedly, in that instance, it's cold and it isn't kind of reaching out to their root problem, but I think you absolutely should be. But then also you want to make sure that you, in that procedure of understanding your message, understand how you're going to tackle it. Are you going to respond to, are you going to follow now every single day with a post on this? are you going to take other pieces of content away for this message? So it's something that my team, we actually had a conversation about, and I think this is about learning. And I think that ThirdBridge, our crisis management structure was there, but this is really putting it to the test. And I think actually it could have improved a lot more, because what I've noticed is that we've had a lot of charity initiatives that we haven't spoken about. And so now the expectation from people internally is let's post about it every single day. Whereas if I'd actually said, let's make sure that this is like a bi-weekly feature. Maybe every Monday we have something about the work, the lifestyle, rather than the commercial and the internal news, so that it then doesn't replace other pieces of content, but it creates an expectation and we give people real value there.
Right, thank you. And please, one of the audience has asked a question around the current recent issues around Black Lives Matter. And they've sort of said how frightening actually it is to seeing the gap between leadership and social media and marketing, and how this has really highlighted this gap. What's your recommendation, advice to marketeers who are trying to engage leadership in key issues?
It's a really hard conversation, because obviously it depends on the brand, the organisation, how they currently structure themselves in terms of social. Obviously, like we've been talking about, you have different sections of, well, you do have different campaigns. So that might, you have your usual kind of evergreen, business as usual content, and then over and above that, you might have educational, business news, you know, all of those kind of things. So I think it depends. It's just quite a tricky conversation if you don't usually talk about your business news, etc. Maybe you're more B2C, but I think there is a real responsibility for organisations now to have deeper conversations with the board, and to understand how people are using social media. I think it used to be used as, or I guess seen as, something that's fluffy, and we're, you know, obviously with COVID and the increase of social media, it is our way of getting to customers and our followers. So there needs to be bigger kind of conversations and strategies internally to make sure that social really kind of leads in terms of a business's ethos, and, you know, whether that means a whole new strategy moving forward. Douglas, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that. For me, it is a complicated conversation.
It really is. It is one of those things where, as we've both said, you need to be responsive, and I think you're right. You definitely need to reevaluate things, and that's certainly something that I've been doing in the last week or two. Because as I say, I think this is all about understanding where your weaknesses are, and this is the thing with marketing and certainly with social media. It is such a powerful tool. We don't get, at the moment, we're not going to visit people. We can't make those face-to-face connections. Social media and maybe an email is the way that you're going to reach out to people. So you need to think, okay, we've done social media in a way that it assumes that we might have face-to-face interaction. It assumes that we might be interacting on a face-to-face basis. This is your chance to get into the face of your audience and reach out to them and tell them why you're thinking, why you matter per se, but telling them why you're here and why you're going to continue to give them value that matter to them. So yeah, my real takeaway is do reevaluate, especially at times of crisis, and don't think, well, we've done it before, it worked when we had this last thing, it's going to work now. No, it's completely different. It's a completely different cultural dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, some of the biggest campaigns that I've worked on, you know, haven't been as successful as some of the off-the-cuff kind of campaigns. So it's, you know, social media is always evolutionary. You know, things change, update. You know, platforms are updating their different initiatives and different aspects to their platforms continuously. But I think we can't be complacent anymore. And I think that, you know, if you do have someone very junior leading your social strategy, I think there needs to be a hierarchy involved right now to ensure that, you know, content that's going out is mindful of everything that's going on this year.
One of the audiences asked that they've seen a decreased engagement on COVID-related topics, such as adapting to the workplace and things like that. Do you think people are bored now with these type of posts? And is it sort of back to focusing on content, which is business as usual?
So I think it is different. There's an influx. So on LinkedIn in particular, the biggest hashtag, I think in the last kind of 2 to 3 months has been COVID, the hashtag COVID and then COVID-19. So, that shows instantly that there's so much conversation going on, your engagement levels are going to decrease because everyone's talking about the same thing. So it is harder to cut through the conversation. And, so I think, but that's not to say that you shouldn't be talking about, the situations and sort of creating content that delivers on what you're doing and how you're helping consumers, customers, followers, etc. But I think I think people need to understand that there is a lot of conversation about it right now. So it is harder to cut through the noise. But again, putting out content that's valuable is always going to keep your engaged audience, or the audience that you've worked hard to build up on your side, and supporting you, and that's really important. So although it seems like there's less engagement, what you're saying is really important, I think, right now. It's not always about the numbers.
I suppose if I were to be the boring numbers guy, and I just happen to be looking at my numbers now for reference. So just to give you some context, so for Third Bridge, COVID was the most popular topic that we discussed last month. We had 12 updates with an average engagement rate of 2.4% and hashtag coronavirus of 2.6%. Whereas let's say something like Burberry, which was one of our content pieces, 2.1%. So the coronavirus coverage is still outperforming. But I also want to just address something slightly different. I saw one of the comments about advice relating more so to brands than to individuals, and I just to that particular question, completely understand that contention. I think one of the mistakes I see that we, and I had this when I was freelancing, when I was consulting with freelancers, is that we sometimes forget that when people are looking for freelancers, they're not looking at them as individuals. They're looking at them with a commercial head. They're looking at them as a business, an individual business entity. So what I mean by that is we sometimes disconnect the commercial, the strategy side of things from a company's content to our own individual personal content. So when we're talking about what is your stance on this and the business line, what is your personal take on this? You as an individual. So I will address the person's name there. So Grace, what is your personal stance on this matter? What is your line, so that when you see things, because social media is also about engaging with other people. When you do engage, what is your stance? What is your position that you're taking? And when you are creating content, make sure that you have a content calendar yourself that you are adhering to. As I say, I think that when we think business individual, we should be putting them on the same level. So I of focusing on that, I just think it's such an important thing, especially now when you're freelancing, you're using social media as a really powerful business tool. We don't think of it like a business. We don't think of it like you would with any other strategic piece of marketing. We think it's just a tweet. It can be so much more powerful than that. So yeah.
Great. We have a question in about, actually aimed at you, Natalie. And often many businesses think this is a race to respond to social media. Adrian Wheeler said the first hour is critical. Do you agree with him? And is it possible for businesses or individuals to be able to respond in that pace of time?
I think it could be dangerous, depending on your brand, your organization, to put something out that's not right. And so I think that is more damaging. Again, if you've got your PR team, you've got your marketing team, you've got your kind of boards all working together with a social media person on content in that hour, then absolutely fine. But I think there's a real danger, and that's what we've seen, you know, potentially a social media manager who doesn't understand a background of, you know, a brand in the last few weeks, and have just quite rightly put out content potentially that they feel is right in terms of the conversation, and then it's backfired with you know, previous incidences. And so we don't know, you know, how a lot of those, most of the sort of fashion beauty brands, etc., sit with separate agencies, and so, you know, perhaps there isn't the communication that's needed right now to have these bigger conversations. So I would say that putting content out for the sake of putting content out can be quite dangerous. But I see the point. But again, I think it really depends on what kind of organisation you are. And I think, you know, well thought out content rather than just performative content is really important right now.
Great. Just some more questions actually for the freelance community who are looking at promoting their personal brand, obviously to win new clients. But often the clients don't want them to discuss the work that they've done and want discretion. So how do individuals promote themselves? And then another question.
Oh, we've lost you, Alice. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, and I muted myself. And another question was asked about Twitter engagement. So what rates people should be looking at? So what sort of engagement rates should we aim for on Twitter? So there's just two questions from the audience there.
Mm-hmm. Shall I tackle this first?
Great, Doug, yeah.
So Twitter engagements, quite an easy one. So for me, I use a tool called, just for reference for anyone that's curious, one of my favorite tools is called Rival IQ. It compares you with competitors. You can do this on a personal level or with your business accounts. So for our Twitter profiles, let me just have a quick check. We are looking at a landscape average, which is a combination of about 20 companies in the financial services industry, of 0.15% engagement rate on average among those competitors. So yeah, if you can hit that, great. But that's also dependent on some of the size of your followers, your industry as well. So it's not a real cut and dry thing. But as I say, from someone that's in the kind of the financial services, 0.15% among our competitors there.
And then there was a second question, which was around how to sort of promote yourself essentially as a freelancer when a lot of business discretion.
Yeah, so on this point, on the first thing about not mentioning client work, please, if you have like an NDA, or if you have an agreement with your client and they tell you not to, think about, you're going to get leads, and your potential client is seeing that you're publicly discussing content that client wishes not to be disclosed. That is a terrible way to blackmark yourself. The client is going to dislike it. They're going to tell other people in the industry, and you're going to give yourself a black mark. Instead, talk about the concepts. Talk about, I worked with a client, but also try to open it up more generally and talk less about your individual wins with clients, but give them value. Talk about your industry. So for me, as a social media marketer, my business is in helping people gain clients. So then I'm talking about, here's some quick wins that you can do to generate clients. I'm making myself the bastion of knowledge. So here's what a click-through rate is. Here's what a cost per lead means. Here is how you can measure your engagement rate. Give them free pieces of content that stands aside from your real heavy client work. So maybe it's talking about for PR professionals, things like reaching out to brands, forming brand relationships, or reaching out to clients, and then promoting yourself as a PR professional that understands the marketplace. I know what this is. I know what coverage is. I know what this means. I know how to generate coverage, rather than saying, I did this for this person who doesn't want to be spoken about. So speak about the concepts, the value that you're going to offer, give them real free information, but please do not mention things that your client has told you not to talk about.
Yeah, very good advice. And actually on our on the portal, on the work crowd, people can put in the types of projects and give a flavour of the type of projects that they've worked on, so that we then match you to the right project, or the projects match the perfect freelancer. And then, so rather than necessarily always naming the brands, you could give a flavour of what you've done to promote yourself, which is great. Someone asked about costings. So how much, which is very interesting. Thank you for all your advice. How much should you budget approximately for a freelancer for one-off social media strategy and content, LinkedIn, email, Twitter for a one-off project? I don't know if that's possible to answer that. That's quite a big question based on how much
yeah, I get asked this question a lot, and again, it depends on your industry, what channels you've got right now, what your goals are. So it's it's once you understand all of those aspects, then you can give a timeline based on your previous experience on strategy. But it is kind of plucking a number out the air. It really is, in terms of kind of timelines, etc., etc. And yeah, it might be that an organization needs a whole kind of brand new strategy, or they might be doing quite well, but it's just about tweaks, and it's about kind of just kind of educating people internally about social media and how it can be developed and grown. But so that's always a difficult one.
Yeah, and sometimes getting a few quotes from freelancers, sort of putting a project together about exactly what you want, posting it out on platforms like the Work Crowd or other places, and getting a couple of responses from freelancers will probably help you gauge what the sort of market is, and timelines around that.
And I think that one of the dangerous things I've seen is that you'll do a lovely piece of strategy for a client, and then they won't even use it. Or some of the kind of, once you've actually got your sales strategy, your social media strategy together, how are your sales team and marketing team working with social, and is, so for example, when you're looking at more kind of leads via social media, perhaps, LinkedIn, advertising, etc., at the end of the sales funnel, are the sales team actually picking up those leads, against those lead gen ads, and actually making those calls, or leveraging it right at the other end? Because if not, then your social media strategy and your advertising campaign is going to fail anyway. So it's about joining the dots and making sure all departments are working seamlessly with each other.
Absolutely. Someone else has asked for some advice on if they're quite new to social media, and they want to guarantee return on investment before actually recruiting a full-time person. What would be your advice?
Oh, you absolutely need.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, so my thing is they need to have a proven track record of ROI. They need to be able to categorically say, this is me thinking, depends on why you're identifying the social media manager, why you're hiring them. Are you hiring them for more of a PPC focus on lead generation? Are you doing it for an engagement? And because sometimes you say you want a social media manager, but you actually want a community manager. You actually want someone that's just going to be engaging with people, not a content strategist. And sometimes the social media manager moniker is one of those ethereal terms that we all have in PR. It's what exactly is it that you're going to do? So if you want a broad social media manager, I think you need to know that they have a proven track record of content creation that actually has meaningful engagement, and they can tell you what the engagement was. They can tell you that they have an awareness of the journey. So setting up tracking on the website and optimizing that journey from social to website, so that you're not just saying, I sent a couple of people to your website. Well, I sent 100 people to your website and they converted on this form, that form, generating you this amount of money. They need to be able to prove and verify those things. Obviously they need to know some of the lingo, but I do think that with marketing sometimes we have different words for the same thing, but as long as they can illustrate the concepts there, I think a lot of the skills will be cut and paste for a lot of PR professionals. So excellent copywriting, be engaged, like on a personal level, be engaging, be kind of keen to learn about things and be on the pulse. The social media manager is not the person that's the last to know. They need to be the first. They need to be the one that already knew it was going to happen before it does. So yeah, those are some of the things I would look for. Proven track record of generating ROI, understanding the journey, the full marketing journey, and how it links to other content creation pieces. Preferably, they have had a history in content creation as well.
Yeah, because I mean, any social, if you're driving traffic to a website that runs slowly, or you can see through Google Analytics very quickly whether the website is engaging. If you haven't got it right at the destination that you're directing traffic to, then that will have a massive impact on your social results. So yeah, it's about this kind of 360 journey across marketing.
Yeah. I've noticed one of the comments as well about PR related posts are so important right now, but don't necessarily attract an ROI like a marketing post would. I have to disagree, because firstly, for Third Bridge, and admittedly it's anecdotally, we saw 2 times the amount of engagement on our PR post last month. So what's your objective? And when you say ROI, that is not simply we generated leads. But if you want to take it from that way, okay, you have created a post and you've got engagement. You can then retarget those people with a PPC campaign. So maybe you have a separate paid specialist, or you're running your own advertisements, and you say, I want to target people that responded to this previous message. You've got a warmer audience there that are more likely to generate a higher ROI, a higher conversion rate. So you've got an audience there. And I think the crux of that question is, how many leads does it generate? Take a step back and remember that social media is not just how many leads come through the door. And for you, how many calls you get through, how many businesses you secure, how many followers did you get, how much growth did you get, how many shares and engagements did you get as well?
Can I chime in there? So, and also from a PR perspective, ROI can be as basic as sentiment as well. So what are people saying about you? Has there been an overall positive positive language and engagement surrounding the post that you're generating? So it can be as little as that. If you've got posts going out, might be great engagement, and you're getting, but is it positive? Because if it's, brands right now are getting a lot of engagement if they've done terrible things in the past, but it doesn't mean it's positive. Mm-hmm. So there's a real a lot of things need to be taken into consideration about what's important when it comes to ROI, especially now.
So I think we've got one last question actually came up in the Q&A section on the Zoom before we have to close. And that it's an important question around, should you sometimes or can you sometimes be silent on major issues and during times of crisis? So, because sometimes businesses are getting it wrong. And for example, Amazon had a big backlash because they had hashtag All Lives Matter. So is it better sometimes to be silent? Should you engage during specific times of crisis? Because obviously we're going through another crisis at the moment. We've been through, several crises are happening. And should sometimes a business remain silent?
I don't think, again, it depends on the industry and your brand, et cetera, but I don't think it's helpful to stay silent. I think, but it's not rushing into putting out content that's not right. So perhaps it's good to sit back and think about, what you're doing as an organization, maybe being just completely honest about it in your posts and creative. So we have a lot of learning to do. I think people really value honesty. There'll be lots of businesses at brands that we sit in here right now and thinking, how can we improve what we do? Everyone's, going through a change and process right now, personally and in business. And that's what life's about. Businesses, evolve all the time as we do personally in our own personal lives. So it's a bigger conversation right now and I think it's quite helpful to be thoughtful about the content you're putting out there. And if it feels right to hold back until you really considered about your messaging, I think you have every right to do that.
I suppose my take on that, would be, think about your personal brand, think about any clients that you're representing, and think, does their audience feel impassioned about this as well? So I think there are some rare cases where you should be silent, and that is a very, very important question that relies solely on the values that you've historically pushed. And so, for example, with Third Bridge, we haven't historically spoken about matters of crisis. We've been quite quiet about it, predominantly because we believed, rightly or wrongly, that that wasn't the expectation of the audience. And so if you're going to post a message, be ready to respond, and if you don't post it, be ready to respond. But I think this is going to be a question for the individual and that their personal brand to say, is this something that my audience resonates with? Is this something that really matters to me? Because some brands, they don't want to engage in any kind of political discourse. So when I worked at one of the corporates, we had a very strict policy, social media policy, which is that our content will not engage in any social or political matters. Flat, that was the line. So we never posted anything remotely political or sensitive in that fashion.
Great. I mean, we've had a fantastic discussion, which I think has covered helping freelancers promote themselves, but also helping freelancers who are working with clients at the moment and giving them and sharing that advice. So, and what I've loved about this has been today is normally at our events, we might have sort of 20 or 30. We've had over 100 people call in this morning, or sorry, this afternoon. So that's absolutely fantastic that we're able to sort of use times of crisis to actually come together even more to share top tips and advice across the entire community. And I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I've got a lot out of this morning. We've had lots of questions, which is fantastic. If there's any further questions, do send them in to me. I'm happy to, I'm sure the panel are happy for me to feed a couple of questions across if anyone has them. And do sign up for more PRCA independent events. We're going to be hosting more of them. Any ideas or anything that you'd like us to host, then please do send that to me, and we'll make sure we get some experts to share their advice. So Doug, Natalie, thank you so much indeed. It's been really kind of you to share your time, and look forward to catching up post these times.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Having me, and thanks for everyone for joining in.
Thank
All
you.
your questions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.